There's nothing to be gained from a man fighting a woman. But this video has had 13 million views. More importantly, it's had a bit of a revival lately. But I will start off by saying I don't see the point of this. You watch it, tell me what you think. This is a good example of why someone that trains a sport martial art should never ever consider themselves self-defense ready. At the end of the day, you need stopping power if you're in a street fight, not those points. So keep watching. Karate girl versus the street fighter. If you're training a martial art and you say you're training for self-defense, you should be able to fight. And it doesn't matter what the rules are, it doesn't matter what the environment is, you should have the basic tenets of being able to fight when put under pressure. Now here's a classic example, and take all the gender differences aside, because in a street fight, you don't get a choice of whether your opponent or the person that's attacking you is going to be the same size of you, the same weight, or even the same gender. She's obviously got a Shotokan background, mostly known for its sport fighting, and she's going up against a street fighter. So obviously she's filling out the distance, so's he. I'm not sure what he's doing. It's quite clear and obvious here is that there's a difference in skill level. She's obviously pretty good at what she does. She's used to point scoring. And normally in a competitive environment, a karate environment in other words, that would be a single point and then the fight resets from that point onwards. Putting all of that aside, this isn't actually a bad test to see what would happen if these two were actually really fighting. What would the tactics be? Well, if this was a street fight, one of the things you wouldn't want to do is to be dancing around and playing with the distance, because you're going to trip over things. There's going to be cars, pavements, even litter. And if you're lucky, there might even be a drunk. And I bet you he's going to rush her. He's also going to grab her clothing, and he's also going to try to punch her to get her down on the ground. Let's see what happens. Lots of dancing around. This isn't a fight. This is not what I would call a fight. See, going in for a single point strike again. And that's not something that is applicable for self-defense. Look, a critical point here is that you have to have stopping power if you intend to fight. I don't care if people are going to say, but this is a small woman versus a bigger guy. In a street fight, in a real world situation, you don't get to choose the person that attacks you. And if they outweigh you, that's a you problem. She doesn't have the stopping power. She's actually moving very, very well. She's keeping her distance, and perhaps in a self-defense environment, she could use that to run away. But the problem with running is that people can chase you. And if you can't run very fast, they'll catch you. Or if you trip over, they'll catch you. If someone steps out, you'll fall over. They'll catch you. Either way, there's always a risk that they'll catch you. I think you get the point here. Movement's great, but at the end of the day, you have to have a credible threat. You have to have stopping power. Wait, competition. Look, he goes in, he grabs hold of the clothing. You see, look, now he's got it down. Now she's... Okay. All right, she's putting up not a bad defense. You're on your back. One of the tenets that you must have is to try to up kick. Even if you think about the basics of ground fighting. She wants to be kicking with her heels, not the points of her toes. Yeah, that's the ball of her foot. You want to be kicking with your heels under the jaw. So he's let her up. He's not too happy about that, is he? This is exactly what I said he'll do. He's grabbed hold of her clothing. And look, you're in a street fight. How many times do you pull someone's clothing over their head and you start punching them? How many times do you grab hold of their clothing and you start punching them? It's just a classic thing to do. Hence why it's worth learning some jacket fighting. Even if you're learning to grapple in a gi, you're learning to strip grips and you're learning to grip back and strike. In my opinion, it's really important because you can apply that to real world self-defense. Because people will grab hold of your clothing. Here's a good example of what happens when someone that knows a fighting style is taken into an area or domain that they don't know. Oh, slaps. Slaps around the side of the ear there, by the looks of it. Whee! Jump in, whee! Competition point, she scored 1 point. And he's still walking it down. Notice he's out of breath. I don't know why. Look, he's got hold of it. And this is exactly what I said. Whoa. I don't know what those punches are. It's like, give me with a side. They're not proper punches. When you're punching like that, you should be punching with your knuckles. She hasn't got the stopping power. This is a problem. And when you're training a semi-contact fighting style, which I guess that's what she's coming from, or that she competes in semi-contact fighting, you're not going to be able to, you don't have the stopping power. She'd be much better off learning Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, to be quite frank with you. The amount of time she was taken down on the ground, at least if she had open hand strikes to the throat, might have made a difference. But my point is that there's nothing here. She's point scoring. She's learnt to train in an environment, scoring points or focusing on scoring points and backing out. And they're singular strikes. At the end of the day, if you're fighting, you have to go in multiple strikes. You can't just hit once. And that's why this is, regardless of gender, regardless whether it's a man or a woman fighting, this is a good example of why sport fighting, where you win a competition in one punch, or one punch deal, yeah, it's great for timing, but it's not realistic and it doesn't cross over into real fighting. Now, I'm not saying karate doesn't work. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is, in this format, the mindset that you need to fight isn't working, because what she's doing is she's going with a singular strike. That's not going to cut it in a real fight. If we use this as an example of what will happen in a street fight, it's actually quite relevant, because in a real world situation, you don't get to control who attacks you. You don't get to control their gender, their size, what they wear, or how they come at you, whether they're weaponized or even the environment. You don't know where the fight's going to go, and you have to prepare for wherever that fight goes. And sometimes you might be on your back on the ground, and sometimes you might be on your toes moving around. But either way, you have to learn the transverse skill, because when it counts, the fight will always go where you least expect it to go. And that's why you've got to be an all-rounder for self-defense. Thanks for watching.